I was gonna just take out and just put Z like that's I imagine that a lot of people give you corny Zorro jokes.
No.
You never got the Zorro?
No.
You're
So
the
I'm
only
the
one
only
corny enough to do it. So
I set myself up for that. And I knew that you were going to say that, Leland. I absolutely knew you were going to say that. Wow. I'm
Look at
glad
us.
that you have less corny friends than me, Kath.
No, I haven't called Z-Snap like that.
Okay. But
Like
no
back away. So it's
Antonio Banderas, Zorro, none of that.
No.
Good start to the show. All right. So
you can do it all you want.
okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for making me feel good. That's typical. You don't want me to feel left out. Right on brand. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you may be, if you can hear the sound of my voice, I want to say thank you. And welcome to another episode of Appreciate the Journey, or as we like to call it, ATJ, the podcast. I have the pleasure of being one of your co-hosts. My name is JoeDREW, but I don't come alone. I come with my partner in time, my brother from another, my main man, LL. LL, say what's up to the people, man.
What's happening, everyone? So happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here as well. I'm always happy to see you, my brother, but today is a special day because we get the opportunity to continue down the theme of connecting with somebody from our journey. Before we get into the intro of this amazing guest, LL, make sure that the people are plugged into how they can connect with us. How can they make sure that they're keeping up with all the content that we're pushing out throughout this journey?
Yes, sir. So, all right, everyone, do us a favor. Subscribe to us on YouTube, add us on Apple Podcasts, like and follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook at ATJ the Podcast. And of course, you can always reach out to us directly through our website, atjcareercoaching.com. If you have any coaching needs, we'd love to help you land your next job.
Man, that was like a commercial. That you got it spot on.
I've been practicing.
Practice.
Oh
man, we got to get shouts out to Al Iverson. AI, whenever you want to come on to the Appreciate the Journey podcast and talk about the practice, come on, let's do it. All right, LL. Enough of the jokes, man. It's time to get serious here, and by serious, I mean not really, because that's not what we do. But the serious part is that we have an opportunity, as I mentioned, to bring on someone who, for this particular episode, has been a part of my own journey. So this is your first time getting a chance to meet someone who I've looked up to from afar, and then sometimes from close as we've had one intersecting stop. But as we talk about Appreciate the Journey, one of the things we highlight is creating connection, and then that connection lasting throughout years. So I'm really excited to bring on this guest, and then we'll talk a little bit about how our journeys connected. But I want to introduce everyone to the founder and CEO of Z Inclusion, Kathleen Zemaitis. Welcome to the show, Kathleen. How are you?
Good. How are you, JoeDREW? Hi, LL.
Hey, Kathleen. So nice to have you here.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to jump into a quick intro, Kathleen, before we talk about the journey and make sure that we level set on the story of how we met, because I think there may be some difference of stories. I think mine is right, but we'll get there. First and foremost, as we always do, we'd like to get all of our guests to introduce themselves using the activity, my fullest name. So the prompts are, and take them anywhere you want. We'll want to give us the origin of your name, any fun stories of how you got your name, whether it's your first name, your surname, any nicknames you may have, any stories around that, anecdotes. Take it anywhere you choose. The floor is yours, my friend.
Okay, great. I have some info on this. So I was born Kathleen Nemeth, that's my maiden name, and but I was known as Kathy throughout my childhood, right? And until I got to my first job, which was in a Chicago ad agency, and there's 30 people in this ad agency, and 4 were Kathys. And the receptionist, we were driving her crazy, right? This is the old fashioned, you'd call into the receptionist and she would route all the calls. And it drove her nuts. So she asked all Kathy's to report to the front desk, and she made us pick pencils. And whoever got the longest pencil got to keep Kathy, who was Kathy Mullins. So I went back to Kathleen from my birth name. And then there was Kitty Hawkins and Catherine Gerber. So from then on, I was Kathleen all the way through probably where you met me, Joe, my TIA days. And then when I got to LPL on a team of 6, there was another Kathleen, and she was like, this will be way too confusing to have 2 Kathleens. So I just did my Z, right? It's my first initial of my last name. It's my husband's name, and now my name. And so just this small group knew me as Z. But then as I got to meet people at the company, the entire company called me Z. So you probably know me too as Kathleen and Z because you came over there.
Yeah.
And then I left that firm, right? And so then I have my own company, and I don't quite know what to call myself. I'm kind of Kathleen and Z, like depending on who I talk to. And now I've got another little name because I'm getting in-laws. So my son got married. So my daughter-in-law and my future son-in-law call me Kath. And so now their families call me Kath. So it's just this, depending on what they call me, is I can get a feel for the decade of my life that I'm at.
Now, I imagine there's going to be a moment where 2 people who know you're going to be talking about you and not knowing that they're talking about the same person because one person's saying Z and the other person's saying Kath. So it's cool to keep them guessing. You can't let everybody think that you that they know you that well, right? You got to keep them guessing.
Well, at LPL, people thought they had to ask permission to call me Z. I'm like, no, you just like that's the deal. Like that's how I'm going by. So
now that's awesome, and as somebody who's there, now your name still comes up. So your legacy and all the work that you've done still reigns, pretty high and very positive. So that's, I always feel pride when I hear it because of course our story. So one of the things that I'm gonna pass to you, LL, because I know we like to talk about like the career journey and kind of get the LinkedIn resume. But before we do, I just wanted to make sure I settled how Kathleen and my journey is connected. Yeah. So this is how I remember it.
Okay, let's see if we.
2009, I took a moment to go to the United Way while I was still working. At the first financial firm, Vanguard, big shouts out to them. But I took a moment and I had a loaned executive position at the United Way. I was managing workplace campaigns with somebody. LL, put a pin in this. We got to get my brother from another, Anthony Grillo, on the line. He was my boss, but he was a great guy. And we managed TIAA's corporate campaign for the United Way. And of course, the person who's running it at TIAA is Z. Right. And so that was my initial introduction to you, because I was supporting some of the programs and events that you were coordinating for the employees at your company. Fast forward probably 6-7 years, I had to look you up because I was looking for a job. I see on the wonderful network LinkedIn that you're at LPL Financial at the time, and that's where I was looking to apply. Made the call or email or whatever it was, and LL, no exaggeration, recruiter called me next day. Oh, I had to apply a month ago. Recruiter called me next day. That is no exaggeration. And I was just like, oh, love it. Love meeting great people throughout your journey, because that's what could happen. Okay,
did you work at Vanguard?
I did. I worked at Vanguard.
Was that after United Way?
So there's a good thing, and this is probably one of the coolest parts of my journey. I was at Vanguard, and they loaned me to the United Way.
Oh.
So I spent a good 5 months at the United Way while being on Vanguard's payroll.
Oh, okay. All right. So I forgot the United Way connection. See, yeah. I just always have in my head that you were Vanguard and that we had met because you were trying to start community relations, I thought, over at Vanguard. I thought that's where you and I like had a coffee or something. We met through the Charlotte Community Affairs Professionals Group.
Yeah.
That's where my head.
So that was the second. You got me. See, LL, this whole episode is going to be Z opening doors for Joe, because there was that group, and I was trying to get into public affairs or corporate community affairs, I should say, And you got me a little invite into that group. Eventually, I never got that. I had to pass the invite on to whoever got the job, but I did get to come to a couple meetings, so that was cool.
That's right. You got to be like in a community position to be a part of that group, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, there you go, LL. That's
so great,
that's the
though.
journey.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah. So Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing that. That's so fantastic to hear the connections and maybe the forgotten connections, but that's so great. But you've already given us a little bit about your background and your experience, but if you could just give us a quick like Cliff Notes version of your resume, just so I, since I don't know you, and the listeners have a good idea of what you've done.
Yeah, so I started after college in advertising and PR and communications, and I really loved that. That was what my degree was, but I didn't find my jam until TIAA, because I had always volunteered on the side. As Joe Drew probably knows, I'm very philanthropic, so I probably worked as much in the professional roles I did in the not-for-profit, just volunteering my time, worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation, Habitat for Humanity, and Crisis Assistance Ministry, and all these wonderful charities. And then TIAA had a community relations position. I even understand what that was, which was basically marrying your love for philanthropy with your love for engaging people. And I thought, wow, I'm going to get paid for doing what I love to do. So I did that for a while. And then they had started diversity work there back in probably about 2008, something like that, 2009. And that was a sister team of our team. And so it didn't quite get off to a great start. And so they kind of tapped the community relations team, which I was a part of, to kind of help with that launch. And so I learned what diversity was all about, which was just beginning back then. If you can imagine what that would have been like, just the word diversity was like, can we say the word diversity in our workplace? It was just kind of a thing, you know? And then I just loved that too. And so I kind of got into this whole corporate citizenship where you kind of put philanthropy and diversity and sustainability kind of came through that point too. So LPL, and this is where Joe and I kind of intersected our time, hired me to start their foundation. And in my interview, I said, well, I don't think you all have diversity or anything like that here. So we could move this position into a bigger position, which is exactly what happened. So I started the foundation. We started diversity the next year, the employee side. And then I kind of end up managing all the communications as well, both internal and external communications. And I launched the client-facing diversity program, which was one of my favorite things to do, because it combined diversity and business, which is, I thought, really kind of exciting. And then like 2 years ago, I just knew that there was just a lot of need for diversity work and a lot of need for coaching executives, because they were finding themselves in this place where they had to be really good in how they communicated and had their empathy and being very, authentic and vulnerable. And that's not how my generation of leaders was trained. So I just launched my own firm. It was like 2-3 years ago, and that's all I do is coach executives, help consult on diversity officers launching programs, and I did a ton of public speaking. I think I'm kind of coming down from that public speaking, hilltop.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great. So let me go back because I do have a question. You mentioned at LPL you did this this client-facing diversity work. So when you say client, like, can you define that for me? Are these advisors? Are these like retail investors? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so LPL is basically the back office for a financial advisor. So LL, if you were a financial advisor and all by yourself, you could hire LPL Financial to be your research, your broker dealer, your your marketing, all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to hire all these people. So LPL's client were financial advisors. And if you can imagine what a typical financial advisor stat is, I think it's 87% are men. And I would say that it skews a lot older, right? It skews very high white men. So only like 10-15% are women, very few people of color, very few LGBTQ, very few next gen, as we would kind of call it. So my job was to help attract a more diverse clientele. So trying to attract women to LPL advisors, try to attract Black advisors to LPL, attract Latinx or next gen advisors to LPL, so that we could not only have a more diverse clientele, but to help those advisors grow.
Yeah, that's
Very
awesome.
cool.
And I was obviously, as we keep talking about our intersection, I made the call, got the call from I passed the interview, LL, shockingly, and got the job there. Is about 2015 through 2018 when you called me and tricked me into coming with you. So Z, before LL, I know you got another question, LL, but I just wanted to double click on one point, because you talked about being at TIA early 2000, jumping into diversity when it wasn't such a hot word like it is today. And obviously, and over the last few years, it's has its ebbs and flows, and we could probably have a whole show on that. I'm just curious, how do you feel now looking back, knowing that you were at the beginning stage of some of these large corporations starting to focus in on creating environments that are diverse and equitable and inclusive, and all the things, all the buzzwords that we can say today? Like, how does that land on you now, being, a decade or so past?
Well, I think, for me, right, I'm a white woman, and so I only know the communities that I'm part of. And so for me, it was just a blessing to learn about all the different communities and get my own self together, because I had a lot to learn, right? I was making a lot of mistakes as myself, excuse me. And it's a very slow path for sure. But what I also realized was very early on, it was obvious to me that and I hope this doesn't sound dramatic, but people's lives and livelihoods were a part of this work, because they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get promoted. There was just bias that people just, very good people just don't know they have. And so I really loved doing the employee diversity work, because it was so much part of who we are as a company. But the great thing about doing the business side, the client facing diversity work, is that it was tied to money and funding and revenue and how we're going to grow as a business. Because if there's any CEO out there right now thinking that you do not have to do diversity work, that company's not going to last long, right? It's going to be the Blockbuster when Netflix kind of came in. So I love being able to do that advisor or that client-facing work, because you could so easily tie the results of what that work was about and why you needed the employee diversity work to be able to recruit people and make sure your internal teams were diverse, to be able to attract people from the outside. So it was a very long process to get people to appreciate it. And now, it just kind of jump started, which I think was needed in this business economy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's such a great story and career so far, Kathleen. But take us back to some of the most pivotal moments that brought you to where you are today.
So I'm first in my family to finish a 4-year degree and be on the business side. So I didn't have a lot of help from my family to be able to understand, what do you do in a business setting? What do you do in a meeting? What do you do in a corporation? Because I didn't have that on my side of the family. So I would say, unfortunately, as you can imagine, since I kind of graduated in 88, I had those 80s and 90s where women we weren't really a big part of the economy or the business workplace. So I was surrounded by men. I should say that I love men, right? You guys are great. I love men. But, being in a male-dominated industry and environment is just really tough. So I think one of the first people that really caught my eye, her name was Lisa. She was the general manager of our ad agency. And she was surrounded by men, but I think she had a PhD in psychology, I think, if I remember correctly. But she taught me how to know the customer. So if you know the customer really well, especially in advertising, you could ground your business decision making on knowing that customer. So I learned that very early on around, if I was trying to be influential, if I knew my customer, I knew my data and all of that, I could win over decisions and budget and campaigns and all of that. And then I think my next, so she really taught me the business sense, right? Like how you do strategy and so forth. I think my next, pivot was moving into that corporate world and really just finding my own style. As Joe knows from me, I'm a very people-oriented person, and I learned at TIAA that you have to really influence people to make things happen, because sometimes people don't report to you or whatever, and those people skills, man, they are I think some of the most important skills that people can have to be able to influence and make impact and meaningful change. So I think those are two examples of, just getting that business sense early on and then learn those people skills and how those kind of marry. And then I think, over time, you just start to, find your own way about what your skills are, what your talents are, what your strengths are. You start to find, commonalities and themes and recurring instances. So for me, for example, it turned out that I'm really good at storming and forming. So if you need to make something from scratch, I can hear what you have to say and what the goals are and the business objectives, and come back and make this, into a nice strategy document and an operational document and move it forward. So I didn't figure that piece out until I was like mid-40s, Yeah. So that was one of those, I think over your time of your career, you just kind of get little nuggets and you build on those skills and you start to know who you are and what your towering strengths are, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I love how you frame that. And it actually gives us a perfect segue into the next question that we have for you, because you talk about, kind of getting all of those lessons, so to speak, as you're going through these pivotal moments. So, we always talk about what were the moments, and then the big rock, small pebbles, are those lessons that you picked up from those moments. So if you can now talk us through a couple of those really important lessons that you gained, that you maybe share with mentees, or things that you just know that have helped push you forward.
Yeah, so I have so many because I've learned so much along the way. One of my first ones was back at that ad agency, like I said, and we were doing a John Deere commercial, and they wanted to do a lawn mow. They were going to mow a lawn on the top of a skyscraper. I forget why. I don't know why. Anyway, so I had to get air traffic control to get approval that we could be on top of a building mowing a lawn, like a fake lawn. And I was calling over in the city and the airport and all these different, and I'm like 24, right? Like I'm just calling whoever I think of. This is before the internet, for people who are listening. So I just kept finding no. So I would just go back to my leader there. His name is John. And they said no because of this. They said no because of this. They said no because of this. And he finally turned to me, he said, "Come back to me when you have a yes." And I thought that was mind-blowing for me, because I was just doing a task, right? I just thought he was going to tell me to do something. I'm going back and forth, versus go find an answer for me. Go solve the problem. Don't have me solve the problem. You should be solving this problem. And it just really turned me into thinking, oh, I'm not just making errands, right? I'm actually on this team. So I think that was one of my first big lessons.
Wow.
It's getting that ownership of the work, and I love that. Yeah, not just a task rabbit here.
Right, for sure. And I think I love to talk about women. So Heather, I know Joe knows who Heather is.
Yeah.
She was my best manager ever, and I will say that she was my first good manager, because before that I just had terrible managers. But she really just taught me. First of all, to believe in myself, which, as you can imagine, if you go through managers that don't treat you very well, it's refreshing to hear that you actually have talent. And so she taught me, we have this phrase called "done is beautiful," because we have a lot of perfectionists on our team. And so we would just kind of tweak communication, or, a plan or whatever it was, we would just tweak it to death. And we would just be wasting a lot of our time. And so she would just remind us to say, look, done is beautiful. Like no one's going to know if you didn't put a bow on it. So let's just make sure that we do great work, of course, but know when you can just stop and make sure that your job is done and done well, but not to kind of over obsess about it. And she also taught me around, just around your talent and your team to make sure that you're doing great work, but you're really developing your team, because you're only as good as the team that you are on, that you're leading, and to make sure that everyone is in the right spots and they're being developed and they're leading and they're finding places to grow and to challenge themselves. And so she was just a great, she's taught me like hundreds of lessons. There's just way too many, but she's taught me lots. And I think I also got great lessons from the CEOs that I worked for. So Mark was one of my CEOs at LPL, and one of his great things was he would talk about failing forward. Yeah. So if you find that you've done made a decision or launched something or whatever it was, and if it didn't work out correctly, then just fail forward, meaning what did it teach you? What did you learn from it? We all make mistakes. Things just don't work out. It doesn't have to be someone's to blame or anything, right? But how do you take that failure and learn from it and grow from it? And then I would say that the last lesson I would mention is Dan is another CEO at LPL. He taught me he would work he was a engineer by trade, even though he's in financial services. And he would teach us all, the whole company, to just start with something small, experiment in a small way. So you could test out your theory in a very small cocoon. So if it doesn't work out, no one has to know about it. But if it did work out, then you kind of make it a little bit bigger, get a wider audience, see if, the stress test is still there, and just kind of, it can go bigger. So being able to try things and experiment in small ways. So both of those CEOs were just wonderful in just, giving you the freedom to try new stuff. And I'll say, I'm sorry, one more person, which is Rich, who's another executive at LPL. He taught me about the minimal viable product. He taught me all of my business skills toward the end of my career, which was basically get just enough of a product together to try it out, right? Just try it out and see if it works. And don't worry if it's not perfect, because your customers and your clients will tell you, what they want. And they'll let you know if the product that you put together is great, they want to see more, or they want to kind of move over to this section. You should be developing something there. So that idea about minimal viable product, it was one of the great things that helped me kind of launch my own business, right? To see, what I could do, but also what people wanted me to do, and just pivot to where the market brought me.
That's amazing. And LL, I know you the same as me, how when I rewatch this, I'm gonna be writing down some of this free Z inclusion consultant where we'll get this much free advice. So I'm gonna write this down, and you're just gonna have to bill us, Z. It's on you, LL.
Yeah. So Kathleen, whether you're, experiencing times where you are failing forward, or maybe you're just crushing it, what do you do to take care of your mental, physical well-being?
So I had a wonderful mother, and one of the things that she taught me was, what's the worst that can happen? And invariably that doesn't happen. So, so she's just always been a positive. You could not have a more positive voice in your heads. When I ever had all that negativity going through, whether it was being bullied at work or a manager that wasn't nice to me, or all that negativity, just one call to my mom, and she was just feed me up and just, give me that nutrition of you're great, you're talented, you're an independent woman, you're going to be doing great, And so I think surrounding myself with people that know that I'm talented and know what my accomplishments have been and my strengths. We have a phrase that I used to use that I'm not going to swear on this stage.
You can.
But it would always be I'd always need a kick some A, take some names speech, right? And I would I know who I could call. I could just say, I'm having the worst day, or I think I just made the worst decision. They'd say, what? you're amazing. And they would just kind of, remind me, who I am and what I can do.
I love that. I really love it knowing you and having the opportunity on the journey with you to know that you get your strength from advocacy and to know you as such a strong ally and advocate. It's cool to see that, you pay that forward, that strength and energy you get from your circle, you pay it forward. And I've experienced it on the other side where you've been my advocate. And so that's super dope to hear, where some of that originates from. So shouts out to Mom Z. Well, it wouldn't be Z because it would be
It'd be
we don't
N.
have to go. Yeah. All right. So one of the things that we always like to talk about here and is you could go in a time machine and you can go back in history. And so maybe you're going back to the ad agency version of when you were Kathy. Like, what's some advice that you would give your younger self? And the purpose for it is so maybe some of our young listeners or maybe some of our more seasoned listeners who are raising young professionals can maybe share that. You've already shared a lot. So, of course, we're just trying to pull more of those big rock, small pebbles out of you. So what would you tell the younger version of yourself?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I would say is know my brand. And if my kids were to be listening to this, they are so tired of me saying, I've been telling them this since they were in middle school, right? Well, I don't think that's your brand. But to know your brand. And by that, I mean, like, what's important to you? What are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your core mission values, right? And also knowing what your strengths are and being able to know who you are and brand yourself in that way, because it makes your life so much easier to know what are some things you should volunteer for and what are some things like, that's not really worth my time, but to know that you need to know what your strengths are. Strengths finders, if people on the call haven't done that before, it tells you, it ranks your strengths, and to know what your top strengths are, it just helps you understand yourself to realize, oh, that's why I am the way. Like, one of my top strengths is woo. And I didn't even know what that was. Oh, Joe, you got it?
Yeah. That's my number one, woo.
And I didn't even know what that was. Right. And it's basically that if you ask people to do stuff, more than likely they're going to say yes. So you should be asking more people to do stuff. So I think knowing your brand is probably wonderful for people to know, because it's going to help them know which path in life they should take and what risks they can take, because they can see themselves in those risks. The second thing I'll say is to take more risks, just to say yes more often. I don't know if I can do that. I bet you can, right? Just try it out. One of the things my mom did when I was moving to TIAA was a corporate, right? I was going from my own business, moved to the corporate world. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. I've never worked for a corporation. It's like thousands of people there, right? And she's, oh, Kathleen, you just go there. If you don't like it, if they hate it, if they don't like you, just quit. No one's going to know you were there. I'm like, you're right. I could go there for 2 weeks, and if I totally mess up, I just don't put on my resume. It was just so great. So, but I taking risks, especially if you are a woman, sometimes women don't take as many risks because we don't have that modeled, I think, in our community as much. I saw a panel of women, executive women at my TIA days, and every single one of those successful C-suite women also the same thing, which is once you find yourself in a comfort zone, you leave that box, you go somewhere else because you want to learn and grow and build tools. And they were, as a women's community, were telling women in the audience, you got to go for it, right? Just try some stuff out, and you might not like it, but at least that wasn't the case. And the last thing I'll say, one of my big lessons over time was you need to toot your own horn. And for a lot of people, it doesn't come naturally for us because we grew up humble. We grew up, polite. One of my learning lessons was I was at one of my corporations, right? And they were evaluating everybody, and they were kind of giving everybody new titles. You know how that always goes, like every 3 years, they just kind of do that. So I was in the marketing organization, and this is back at TIA, and everybody on my team got a senior marketing manager and I got marketing manager. So everybody was on one level and I was one below. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, and my boss was in New York, and so she didn't see my work. And I call her my great friend, Benicia, who's one of my best mentors as well. And I go, Benicia, I don't know what happened. And she said, well, does she know what you do? And I go, well, shouldn't she know? She's my manager. And she's like, well, did you tell her what you're doing? I'm like, well, she's my manager. So what I realized is that was on me. It wasn't on my manager. She's in New York. She's fighting fires in New York. And I'm in Charlotte. And Benicia had managers from afar before. So she's like, you got to toot your horn. You've got to tell people when you're doing things, letting people know the accomplishments that you're having. And the next year I got that silly senior thing, but it really realized, like, I don't tell anybody my work. I hope that magic fairy comes over and puts stardust and says, oh, you're promoted. Yeah. So I've always told my team, the people that have been on our team, you've got to make sure that people know the work you do. Don't be shy about it, because if you do great, then the team looks great, then the company looks great. Like, you're just being, what I keep telling them is, you're being selfish actually by sharing your great accomplishments, because you could have made our team look much better if people knew that X was done, right? So, and people define their authentic way of being, I won't say boastful, but just sharing what they do. But that's so important, I think, for people.
Wow.
That is something that most people just don't do. And Joe, you know this, like, I mean, you've been on, we've been on teams together. Like, one of the things I always tell people is like, hey, if you get a good customer or client email, something positive, forward it to me.
Yeah.
Like, let's share it with the team. Let's just put it all out there. And of course, if you're working with somebody else and they do something great, let's share it in the team meeting. And people just don't do that. And it blows my mind. And I get it. It's a tough thing to brag about yourself, but it's just so important. And I'm so glad you brought that up. So hopefully everybody watching or listening, they can kind of move forward with that.
I agree. And before you move forward to the next question, one of the things that you said, Kathleen, that I've been double clicking this whole episode. You talked about, well, it's not hard for me to toot my own horn, so that part I already knew. But all those other ones, I think those are great lessons. But you talked about how you give to your kids, and since middle school, your kids knew about the brand, that's not your brand, things of that nature. Where that jumped off the screen at me and resonates is because I have the pleasure of interacting with one of your children.
Yes,
and your daughter, shouts out to more. I mean, phenomenal young lady. Got an interview with the organization working for Rivian Automotive Company, and I remember connecting with the hiring manager, saying, hey, I know this young lady, she's applying for the internship, hopefully you get a chance to, the thing that you absolutely would do with someone that you're affiliated with. And I remember contacting me back like, the interview was amazing, I'm walking around prideful. Like, I've only talked to the young lady one time, but I got pride in my heart. Like, I did something, and I wasn't shocked because I know, where she came from, and, obviously the lessons she learned from her mother. But, that just resonated in my mind when you said that, because I've seen it for myself, and just watching how she navigated, that challenging environment, and just the feedback I heard about her was always, just through the moon. So hopefully she gets a chance to watch, have some pride in mom, but don't forget about your boy JoeDREW.
Well, she's calling an hour. We talk on Sundays, so I'll let her know. But I think, LL, to your point, if we have parents on the call, sometimes parents don't realize that their kids might show their strengths in middle school, right? If you're really paying attention. So, for example, Morgan, our Joe mentioned, our daughter, she was shutting off water faucets at the age of 9. And I'm like, what? I told her, I'm like, I don't know what this is, but this is a career, because she was so adamant about turning off this water faucet. Of course, now she's in sustainability, makes all the sense in the world. And our son, Evan, would always want to tear things apart. Like, he want to go and take like a laptop apart, or, like a blender or whatever it was. And he's an engineer, right? So if you're a parent in the audience listening today, it's super easy to figure out, if you're watching, what your kids are great at, and they can kind of create their story early on. So by the time they are interviewing for college or other things, that they already have a sense of themselves, versus discovering it in their 20s.
Yeah. Great point.
Hello, your parents must have knew when you were 8 or 9 that you were going to be a HR manager because you were just telling all the other kids what to do on the playground.
Sure, that sounds right. I don't know.
So Z, this is the last question, and this is, we do it last for a reason, because we think out of all the conversation that we have, this is one of the most important portions. It's this opportunity to give flowers, right? And so the idea is, there's been so many, you've already named a bunch of people who've been impactful in your career, but if you could just identify one person or two people that you would say, here's a flower while you can still smell it, for the influence, the impact that you've had on my career, who would that person be, or those people be? Who would you hand your flowers to?
Gosh, I have way too many flowers, Joe. But I would say, for me, I'm a big promoter of women, and women have shaped my life, from, as I mentioned, my mother, and all these women along. I feel like all these women along my path helped me learn, helped me grow. And if they're listening now, they know exactly who they are, because they're the ones I would call, in a crisis. And, I'm on text exchanges with some of them still. I had an SVP group of women that were wonderful for me. I had all these women clients at LPL, just wonderful, wonderful women along my path. And again, I love men, right? But the women were the ones who would just, lift me up and give me encouragement and challenge me on things and pull me aside and give me great opportunities. And, even up to our executives, Michelle Arshakoff is a great example, Joe, right? She's, she's one of those executives at LPL that was just spot on, right? She always made me feel like I could come to her with anything. And she always was, very calm and cool and logical. And, and my team, like I said, Heather, and on that team was Lauren and Allie and Tara were still talking together, and Benicia, like I mentioned before. But I have so many women. If I could, give out flowers, it'd be to all these women that I've worked with, because they have just, they don't even know, right? They don't even know what they've given me, but they've just given me that confidence that, and the blessings in life that I will always look back on.
It's beautiful. Well, you two have blessed us today by talking us through your amazing journey, by giving us such awesome big rock, small pebbles, and just sharing so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Shouts out to all the women that you've mentioned who have been impactful in your journey. I think LL and I have, on a couple episodes, have documented how some of the most impactful leadership that we've received have come from women. So we too share that, knowing that it's just been an amazing part of the journey. It's been strong women who identify, challenge, and help nurture. And so just awesome connection points there. LL, as we're closing out, I want to give you opportunity to again share, how can the people connect with us? How can they reach out? Where can they find any other content that we have? Maybe they missed some of the previous episodes. They plugged in when Z graced us, and now they want to go backwards and watch some of the prior episodes. How can they do that?
Yep, and I will try to not sound like a commercial this time, but
okay, cool.
I would love everyone's support here. Do us a favor, subscribe to us at ATJ the Podcast on YouTube, add us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and then you can also reach out directly to us on our website, atjcareercoaching.com.
Yeah. As the former ad exec, what you think, Z? How was that?
That was awesome. You did great.
There you go. Look at that, man. Positive reinforcement. Z, any final thoughts or any last words that you want to impress upon our listening audience before we close out for today?
I'll just mention, because it's just coming to my thoughts, Joe, about how we met, right? I mean, I think people is everything. I'm a big people person, as I mentioned, and the people in your life give you blessings. And I think that, when you're able to connect other people and connect with people, it just makes business so much more personal. And so that's the only thing I would suggest is meet as many people as you can to help those connections. And they're going to bring you through life in such beautiful ways you don't even realize.
Very beautifully said. I'm a big fan of the former NBA player, now turned media personality, Jalen Rose, and he always says that people come in your life either to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. You have 1,000% added and multiplied for me personally and so many other people. And I want to thank you for the time. Thank everybody for listening in to Appreciate the Journey, the podcast. This has been a wonderful episode with the superhero Z. Like Z, not Zorro, but Zemaitis. On behalf of LL, Z, I'm your boy Joe Drew. We'll see you soon. The destination is the journey.